Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, this time around for Far Cry 4 for the PlayStation 4, the latest game I beat, and I have to say I'm very impressed with this game. At the same time, I know I'm late to the party, but I have this tradition going on for the Far Cry games where I wait for them to drop down in price to around $20 and then I buy them, which is, you don't have to wait that long for these games to drop down in price. 6 months tops or a year after their release, they're already very cheap. So I got this game obviously for 20 bucks a couple of months ago, and then I decided to play the game, and I'm really glad I did. This is another very solid entry on the first-person shooter open world type of game with light RPG elements that Far Cry has been the Far Cry games have been offering us for the couple of past of entries, and this is a very solid one. I know there were a lot of complaints, or not a lot of complaints, but some people complained that this game should have been called Far Cry 3.5 because it's very similar to the previous entry in the series, and I agree completely. This game, it is technically Far Cry 3.5, from the mechanics of the game, from the physics to the way the game is played, the side quests, the missions, the overall structure of the game is basically Far Cry 3 with a different coat of paint as far as the setting and the characters. But other than that, and the story obviously, but other than that, it's the same game. However, I'm a pretty lenient person when it comes to games being repetitive, and I'm a big fan of if it's not broken, there's no need to fix it. And that's exactly my approach with this particular game right here. And I know when I reviewed the Batman Arkham Origins, for example, for the Wii U, a lot of people were complaining that it was very similar to the Batman Arkham Asylum and City, and therefore the game started to become a little bit stale and a little bit boring. But me personally, again, I enjoy that game, Batman Arkham Origins, and this is the same case with Far Cry 4. In which I enjoyed 3 and I also enjoyed this game. However, if I had to pick one of them, I would definitely go with Far Cry 4. I think this game had a better story, better characters, and the setting itself was a little bit more interesting to me. This game takes place in this fictitious city of Kyrat, which is set I guess in the Nepal region or the Tibetan region. It's a mountainous region, mountains with snow, but there's also other climates and other different types of settings in this particular city that the game takes place. Now the story, I thought it was much better. Far Cry 3 was the story of a bunch of spoiled college students, rich brats that went on this vacation in this exotic island, and they get kidnapped. In Far Cry 4, you take the role of RJ, I forgot the last name, and basically you live in the US, but your mom dies, and her dying wishes were for you to scatter her ashes in her native homeland of Kyrat, in this very particular place. And then you go to Kyrat, you get kidnapped by the antagonist in this game, which is Pagan Min, which is here, this guy here on the cover, which he's kind of like the king of this area of Kyrat, and you manage to escape from his clutches early in the game, and then you find you're rescued by this group of rebels called the Golden Path, which is you actually learn that your father was a founding member of the Golden Path, and which is why all these people, all the members of Golden Path have a great admiration over you, and you decide to join them and to help them in order to dethrone this evil king or antagonist known as Pagan Min. And it's a very interesting take on this game because you have to deal with the Golden Path has two different leaders, Amida and Sabal. Amida, she's a female, Sabal is a guy, and early on in the game you have to start making decisions on who you will support. And the game is very interesting because each character has its own personality, its own character. Sabal, he's more of a traditional type of person. He wants to protect the religious beliefs, the cultural beliefs of the people of Kyrat, and he's a very, I guess, conservative type of guy that wants to keep those values intact. Whereas Amida, she's more of a progressive person. She wants the people from Kyrat to evolve to be a little bit more free as far as of their way of thinking and cultural aspects. And it's as you progress through the game, I found it very interesting on how you start learning that neither of them are in the right. It makes your decision very difficult towards the end of the game, because you have to keep siding with one of them. There are several campaign missions in which you have to choose either Amida or Sabal. You have to perform a mission for one of them. You can't really do both. You can't please both, basically. And basically, as the game progresses, you actually find, or you get into the head of these characters and their ideals. And Sabal, which is, the conservative guy, the cons of his method is that, he wants to keep certain things, such as the marriage, fixed marriages within the people of Kirat, and which implies that it's okay for them to marry like young girls that are like 7, 8, 9 years old. The game implies that Sabal is trying to marry this 9-year-old girl who is supposed to be the next chosen one, or the chosen goddess, or whatever. So there are certain cultural or traditional things that are very antiquated that obviously affect the people of Kirat, and this is one of them. And Sabal wants to protect that. He wants to keep that intact. Which is which is kind of messed up, marrying young girls or whatever, and that's when Amida comes in. She's obviously a female, and she's a girl, and she wants to end with this antiquated way of thinking, which is pretty good. But at the same time, she's all for basically child labor, and have children work in drug fields in order to produce money, to keep the people happy, and to keep the people employed, and to have some sort of income. Whereas Sabal, he doesn't have a financial plan. Like, once the Golden Path overtakes Pagan Min, Sabal doesn't have a very stable or secure financial plan to support the people. And Amida, her plan is to use child labor and have all these drug fields, drug trafficking basically, in order to have money in this place, which is it's a lose-lose situation almost, which makes you. I know a lot of people were upset about this, because there's really no happy ending, or sort of speak. There's no way to pick a happy ending, but I thought that was a very realistic approach. Coming from a third world country, I grew up in South America. I think this game provides a very good representation on the ideals and just a way of thinking that leaders have. You as a person, you have the right to vote. If it's a democracy, you have the right to vote, and then you put these leaders up front to lead your country or your region or whatever. And more often than not, these people end up being corrupt, or they're in for just the power and the money, and they don't really care about the people. And this is a perfect example of what's going on in the world right now, with corrupt people that have their own ideals, that think for themselves. And I think it was a good representation. So the fact that there's no happy ending, Hollywood happy ending, and this game was perfectly fine by me. But I know a lot of people had some problems, because it's a very negative type of approach, if you will, as far as the story and the characters of the game. And it's funny, because as the game progresses, you really start doubting yourself, and you think, is this a Pagan Min character, the king of Kirat, is he really the bad guy? It makes you think. And towards the game, some things happen that I thought that were very interesting, but I'm not going to say them because I don't want to spoil them. But you really start thinking, midway through the game, am I doing the right thing here by supporting these Golden Path people? But from that point of view, obviously the story, in my opinion, was much better than Far Cry 3. As far as the setting, I already kind of went over that. It's a mountainous region, which is pretty cool, because it added a few new gameplay elements. You can rock climb, basically. You can throw ropes, you can climb using ropes and other mountain gear equipment, if you will. So there's a lot of 3D platforming in this game, which is pretty cool, in order to reach some areas. And I'm a big platformer guy or person, so I thought this game handled those areas in a fun way, because it's a first-person game, but at the same time it kind of becomes a 3D platformer. You know, swinging in ropes and from one mountain to the next, you know, jumping gaps and just finding your way, certain ways to climb the mountains and things like that. I thought it was pretty fun. And speaking of 3D platforming, there are other elements such as your typical take down the radio towers, which in Far Cry 3, you know, there were 18 radio towers, and same thing with Far Cry 4. There are 18, I think, as well, radio towers, which is kind of like a 3D platforming segment, because you have to find your way going all the way up in these radio towers and deactivating them, which is, I thought, it's very fun. Like every time I went to a tower, just looking at the environment, where will you put your foot, where will you make the next jump, do you have to use your rope, and so forth. I thought it was a very fun. I always have fun climbing those towers in the Far Cry games. As far as the combat, the gameplay, first-person shooter, but very balanced, very accurate, very good physics, very solid gunplay. Very similar to Far Cry 3. It's basically a copy-paste job as far as the physics and the gunplay, but very interesting and diverse selection of weapons. You have bow and arrows, you have sniper rifles, shotguns, machine guns, light machine guns, pistols, revolvers, you name it. There's a ton of weapons in this game that get unlocked by you can either buy them or you can unlock them by doing side quests and things like that. And there's also the hunting aspect of the game, which you need to hunt animals, and you need their skins to craft more new equipment, such as, you know, pouches to carry more ammo, pouches to carry more equipment, and to loot things, to carry more money and things like that. So that's another very addicting element of the Far Cry games. I usually, when the game opens up, I go on hunting sprees, and I open up my map. I see what kind of animals are scattered through the map. I go there, I get the skin or whatever I need, and I craft my equipment early in the game. That way, I have an easier way ahead of me. And there are some light RPG elements. For every kill you get experience points. For every new area you discover, you get experience points. For the collectibles that you collect, you get experience points. And you can transfer those experience points into skills. You know, skills that allow you to improve your melee combat, make you more stealthy, make you run for longer periods of time. Crafting skills, skills that make you breathe more time underwater, things like that. There's a ton of skills in this game that you can kind of craft your character and model him after what you're trying to achieve. But obviously, if you want to complete the game to get the Platinum Trophy, like I did, because I had a lot of fun in this game, you have to get all the skills in the game. So you end up being this very powerful person by the end of the game. And speaking of going for the Platinum, there's a lot of collectibles in this game, but the cool thing is, I really like how Ubisoft handles the Platinum games in the Far Cry games. Yes, they are lengthy. Yes, they can be challenging in certain parts. But the collectibles are handled very well. You do not need to collect 100% of the collectibles. You can only collect, if you collect most of them, you already get a trophy for doing certain things, like collecting the masks, for example. You only need to collect like 15 out of, I don't know, 30, and the trophy will pop up. So you don't have to collect all of them. And I personally found myself collecting more than I needed, just because I needed more experience. But the collectibles in this game are handled phenomenally. And I said the same thing about Far Cry 3, and Far Cry 4 is basically the same. The collectibles are just very fun. You open up a map and you see where the collectible is. You go there by driving or running or whatever, gliding. And sometimes you end up finding new areas, like caves, like waterfalls. You go underneath the waterfall or behind the waterfall, you find a cave, and that cave has several different layers of rocks, and you have to climb the rocks, and there it is. That's your treasure, that's your collectible that you find. So it's not like they're just thrown in there in the environment. More often than not, you have to find new areas, secret areas, and they make exploring the game very fun, and it's just very easy to get lost into the collectibles. Because they're just fun to explore the island, to explore the mountain regions, and You know, personally, I had a lot of fun. And like I said, even though after the fact that I got the trophies for you know, for some of the collectibles, I kept going for them because it, you know, you get more experience. Obviously, that helps you level up. But at the same time, it's just fun opening up the map and going from one place to another. Graphically, this game looks very, it's a very vivid, very colorful game, similar to Far Cry 3. I really enjoyed the graphics in this game. The frame rate is an improvement over the PlayStation 3 version of Far Cry 3, which had very sluggish performance, very slow, a lot of slowdowns. This game, for the most part, runs in solid 30 frames per second, but it's cursed in the sense that there is a last-gen version for the PS3 and the 360 that kind of, in my opinion, hindered the development a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see the jump from this game to the next Far Cry entry, or from this to Far Cry Primal, which is the other game that's out now. So the graphics, they look great, they look fantastic, very vivid, very colorful, and just do the game justice, in my opinion. So overall, Far Cry 4, a very fun experience, highly recommended, especially if you guys can get it for cheap. In my opinion, the story is better, the characters are better, especially Pagan Min, which is the antagonist in this game. The voice character, his personality, everything about him is just fantastic. I really enjoyed him, and I wish we would have seen more of him in the game. But as far as the story, the characters, in my opinion, it's better. The environment is better. The Karat, in my opinion, was more fun to explore and just to fool around. But as far as one last thing, the challenge, I guess, in this game, the game can spike up in challenge considerably in a very unfair way. There are some enemies at the beginning of the game that are very weak, but towards the end of the game, those same enemies, without like armors or anything, they deal more damage and they take longer to kill, which takes a little bit from the immersion of the game, which I really hated, because you have these normal enemies that at the beginning of the game you just shoot them once and they're dead, and because supposedly the game is easy, you're just starting the game, and at the end of the game, which it should be the opposite, because at the end of the game you have all these skills, you have all these weapons that you bought and upgraded. They should be easier to kill, but the game almost levels them up as the game progresses. And on top of that, the game introduces new enemies that have armors and better weapons, which those are fine. It's fine for those enemies to be tough, because those are new enemies that have armor and other perks. But you know, the regular run-of-the-mill enemies, they magically also improve performance, which I thought it took a little bit from the immersion. No matter how you play this game, whether you go all gung-ho and attack the outposts, or whether you decide to go stealth, the game still remains fun, in my opinion. So that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.